على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Allah reminds us, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. You who believe, be mindful of Allah as is His due, and make sure you devote yourselves to Him to your dying moment. And He reminds us, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. People, be mindful of your Lord who created you from a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the pair of them spread countless men and women far and wide. Be mindful of Allah, in whose name you make requests of one another. Beware of severing the ties of kinship. Allah is always watching over you. And He reminds us, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Believers, be mindful of Allah, speak in a direct fashion and to good purpose, and He will put your deeds right for you and forgive you your sins. Whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger will truly achieve a great triumph. In November of last year, I started a series of Khutbah around this one very important hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, wherein he educated us and told us about people. And he said, you will find that people are mines of gold and silver. The best of you in the time of ignorance before Islam will be the best of you in Islam if they gain an understanding of the religion. And we spoke about the need to take this, the key aspect of this hadith with regard to the American Muslim community, which is that we need to, if we're going to find the full potential as human beings realized under the framework of our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our submission to His commandments and our love and devotion to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that will result in a most beautiful expression of the capacity of us innately as human beings only when our understanding of Islam is sound, only when our understanding of Islam is perfected. The best of you in Islam, the best of you in ignorance before Islam will be the best of you in Islam if they gain understanding of this religion. And we spoke about the need to recognize that we have to trust in the knowledge that this religion is based and is intrinsically based on rational understanding of Allah's ayat, of Allah's signs. That Allah does not require us to understand things without rationales, without reasoning. That He does not ask us to disengage our reasoning process and our reasoning capacities, but on the contrary, He asks us to engage it full on. And one of the things that we have to recognize, that perhaps unlike other religious traditions where you had in the course, maybe not at the beginning, maybe not all the time, but through the course of the experience of many different religious traditions, you have had a conflict between religious principles and what you might call scientific or secular principles. And in the Muslim tradition, you have countless examples where this potential tension arose, but it was very interestingly managed. So you can think about somebody like the 9th century Muslim by the name of Jabir ibn Hayyan, who is most well known both in the East, both in the Muslim context as well as in the West, in the European context, as somebody who repudiated alchemy, which was not a science but sort of almost like a mystical vision of converting all kinds of metals into gold. Right? Alchemy was transformed into a real science, chemistry. And this is Jabir ibn Hayyan's contribution. But Jabir ibn Hayyan is known as the father of chemistry in the West. But what do we know about him in the Muslim tradition? He had another title. He was called the Sufi because of his intense works, his intense devotion to Allah and His prophets, and his intense spiritual contributions to the community. There is a very famous book that he wrote on chemistry. The title is The Book of 70 Kitab al-Sir'in. And he starts this book, and this is a very common thread with the majority, if not all, of the Muslim scientists from the medieval period in Muslim history. He starts and says, certainly the mention of Allah is more noble, majestic, and greater than what follows. What follows is his huge contribution to chemistry, right? But he caveats that. He says, what I'm about to document in this book of mine, Kitab al-Sir'in, is nothing compared to the glory and the glorification of Allah. Right? This balance between the ability to connect with Allah, who is unseen. Allah cannot be put into a test tube, cannot be measured, right? He can be experienced. And we have these signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we do not perceive, we do not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was never a problem within the Muslim tradition. It has become a huge problem in the secular tradition in post-modernity, right? Well, we cannot experience Allah, so there is no Allah. That's a huge problem in our modern world. It was never a problem in our experience in the Muslim world, right? And we need to restore that balance. That people were highly oriented towards the exploration of the world around us, what we call the scientific method, what we call the scientific inquiry, without a shadow of fear of losing our devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now we live in a time and a place, and other religious traditions have also lived in a context where these two things are opposites. They're not supposed to be opposites, and they were never opposites in the Muslim tradition. And the reason is not accident. This is not an accident that these are not opposing things in the Muslim tradition, right? Because of the contribution of our ulama. What is that contribution is what we should briefly explore. Islamic legal thought, Islamic jurisprudence, usul al-fiqh, always divided the rulings of Allah's law into two clear categories. Okay? When it came to its connection with reason. When Allah commands in the Quran, Allah commands the Prophet to command us, and all of those commands, if they're put together and you analyze the commands, those commands fall in two categories with respect to the use of reason. Now, the Prophet didn't teach us this explicitly. Our scholars developed a framework to see the commands in these two categories. The first category is what our ulama call tawqifi, which means that they're immutably fixed. We pray 5 times a day. Do we know why? Why do we pray 5 times a day? Why not 3? Why not 7? So the scholars had this interesting framework. They said, we ask a question. If we cannot find the answer in Allah's own words as to the rationale, as to the illah, as to the reasoning for that command, we then declare it tawqifi, this term I just used. And we don't go digging into why that is the case. If Allah has clearly expressed a reasoning for the 5 daily prayers, or whatever the question might be, then we declare it mu'allal. It is rationale based. So there you've got these two categories. Commands from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for which Allah Himself tells you a reason, or by the use of our rational inquiry, our scholars can come up with a reason as to why this is the case, why the command, both in the form and in the purpose of the command. If you cannot find a reason, because either Allah hasn't mentioned or the scholar's mind cannot explore and produce or propose a reason that is acceptable. And here's the interesting part. The acceptability is not the opinion of one, it is a consensus over time and space amongst our scholars. 5 daily prayers, why is it 5? We don't know. It's Allah's hikmah. But we don't know why it's 5. Why isn't it 3? Why isn't it 7? So the 5 is tawqifi. We don't touch that. We don't play with it. This is one of the reasons why our ibadat continue to be as intact as they were at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. We know if you check the sources or Christian sources, you will recognize, those who study that material, you will recognize that Isa alayhi salam prayed. He prayed with qiyam and ruku and sujood. It's very clear in the text. How many times did he pray in the day? Perhaps he prayed 3 times a day. Okay. That's less clear. But why is it that Christian communities today have lost the prayer of Isa alayhi salam? Why is that? Because there was no protective frame like the frame I mentioned to you that our ulama developed. They developed the frame of protection around the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that allowed people to understand and yet not discard because they couldn't understand. So what was clear as a command because of the text, because of the commanding nature of the text, but that did not have a stated illah, that did not have a stated reasoning, our ulama declared it tawqifi. And the majority of the other commandments, there's always an illah. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. So why is fasting prescribed? There's a very clearly stated reason. Because it increases taqwa. Okay, so the illah is there. Okay, prayer. Why prayer? Because it brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The purpose of the prayer is very clear. But the form of the prayer and the 5 daily prayers, and why don't we start with sujood first in Salāt? And then we have ruku and then we have qiyam. Why not? There's no rational reason for that. It's a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The form has been given to us direct by Jibreel to the Prophet ﷺ, who then taught us. And we don't fool around with that. Because this protective framework was developed, the salah of the Prophet is with us. You are using it today. That is the reason of the protection, because of this framework. Why do you pray Fajr and Maghrib and Isha audibly, but Dhuhr and Asr are silent? Do you know the reason for that? Ask a scholar, he or she will tell you, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why Fajr was commanded to be read aloud by the Imam or if you're praying by yourself. But Dhuhr and Asr are silent. Scholars have asked this question, particularly Hanafi scholars. They've asked this question and they've said, we don't know the answer. That's why it's tawqifi. That's why you don't use your mind and say, you know, I think there is an interesting reason why Fajr and Maghrib and Isha are allowed, so we should do Dhuhr and Asr allowed too. Nobody does that. Why? Because you did not come up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't give us a reasoning, the Prophet didn't give us a reasoning, we declare it tawqifi, we declare it protected, and we don't fool around with the form. This is the amazing protection our ulama developed. But at the same time, if you have a question, particularly the Hanafi tradition, but also the Maliki tradition and the Shafi'i tradition, less so the Hanbali tradition, the usul part of these madahib clearly developed this strong inquiry process to figure out what is Allah's rationale. In fact, they went to the point that they said every command of Allah has an illah. Every command of Allah has a rationale. Either Allah has stated it or Allah is silent. Where He's silent, He puts it as an obligation on us to figure it out. But as long as we haven't figured it out, we declare it tawqifi, and if we have, we state it. You know, there is an ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and He is the Lord of the two Easts, Rabbul Mashriqayn wa Rabbul Maghribayn. If you look at consult the commentary, the tafsir, if you go to the commentaries from the time of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, they'll tell you, we don't know what this means. What is the Lord of, how is Allah the Lord of the two east and the two west? We see one east, we see one west. Where is the two? It's very consistent, the commentary is very consistent. We don't know. He is the Lord of the two east and the two west. But what is the two east and what is the two west? We don't know. And the ulama is, again, that framework that they developed, we don't know, so we stay silent until we figure it out. And then there came this, and I forget his name right now. Then there came this alim who was an astronomer who said, you know what potentially the two east is? It's the place where the sun rises in the summer, and then when the sun rises in the winter, there is an angle of difference, right? So that's the two east and the two wests. And what is that angle? That's the angle of the inclination of the earth to the sun. Who discovered this? A Muslim. Who discovered this? And that is the same Muslim who looks at that ayah and says, perhaps the Lord of the two east are the 2 points between which the earth arises in the horizon on the east and sets in the horizon on the west. It's a reasonable explanation. But there is humility in our scholars and in our method that when Allah hasn't stated a reason, and we figure out a possible reason, we say this is likely a reason, but Allah knows best. It may not be the right answer. And this is the framework of protection. So I share this framework with you to recognize that our ulama created a system, a mechanism of thinking about the commandments of Allah that allows us to explore the reasoning of Allah's commands, even when Allah hasn't stated it. And they created this protective zone where you could explore the reason and still be humble and maintain humility, that we don't claim final knowledge of Allah's reasoning. But we nevertheless explore as to what the reasons might be. Because exploring the reasoning of His commands creates a higher level of connection and commitment to following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands and obeying them and obeying and following the Prophet's الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. The intrinsic rationality of the law of the Prophet ﷺ shows us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the law for us, for human beings, and not the human beings for the law. In other words, the law is meant to serve us. The Sharia and the commandments of Allah is meant to serve us, is meant to help us, is meant to protect us, is meant to give us blessings in this earth. Right in this earth. Sharia is not for Jannah, it's for earth. It's for our lives here. And it is meant to give us protection, it's meant to augment and enhance our lives. It is not meant as a burden on us. And the ulama recognized that you cannot blindly apply the commandments, that the commandments must continue to be understood for their relevancy, and that's why they developed these 2 categories. Tawqifi, where commands are so explicit without any clarity on the rationale for it, that we must protect it, and that's what they did. And then there are commands that are flexible, that because of the illah, if the illah doesn't apply, if the conditions don't apply, then the command is flexible, it changes. Right? The command is flexible and it changes. And that is why, if you look at some of the terms that we use for our to designate ulama, right? We use the word haffaz, right? What does that designate? Somebody who has memorized the Quran. But we use the word fuqaha for the ones who understood the text and who explained the text. A hafiz could be a faqih as well, but a hafiz is not a guarantee for the understanding of the text. It's a guarantee for the absorption of the text, but not a guarantee for the one who explores, understands, and clarifies, and communicates, and explains the text. So this is not out of accident that our religious tradition created this amazing structure which has protected the original revelation and the original practice of the Prophet. As I mentioned earlier, if you go to any Christian denomination and you ask them, how did Jesus pray? There is massive confusion as to how he actually prayed. Okay? That knowledge has been lost. Okay? If you go to Jewish denominations, other than the Orthodox, who will still bow and prostrate and pray like Musa alayhi salam prayed, conservative and reform and reconstructionist and renewal communities, these are the different groupings of the Jewish tradition. What is the ritual? What is the actual prayer? It's lost. It's not there anymore. Whether it's lost or it's changed is a minor point. The fact is that what was taught is no longer what is used. And when you ask the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam what he practiced, are you practicing that? Are the 1.7 billion Muslims today, 1.3, capable of practicing that? Absolutely. Without a shadow of doubt. And it is this amazing gift that has been granted to this Ummah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in this Ummah, ulama, who created these frameworks that have protected us. So may Allah continue to guide our ulama, may Allah continue to guide us in benefiting from our ulama, and guide us into a sound and authentic understanding of this deen, which connects hearts. You have our children who are bombarded, who are attacked, who are under tremendous pressure. One study says 1 out of 4 Muslim American kids experience post-traumatic stress disorder because of the bullying, because of the irrational behavior that their peers exhibit, sometimes their teachers exhibit toward them, because they're Muslims. Because the perception of the larger community is Islam is irrational. And here I'm telling you how rationally based our ulama created the knowledge base of Islam. Do you know this enough to give your child the confidence to understand what an amazing tradition they are a part of? Do you know this well enough? Are you able to explain this to your children to give them immense confidence in being able to talk and explain this religion? That is the need of the times. It's the need of the times to help ourselves and our children be confident of this beautiful religion, be confident of the rational, intrinsically rational basis of this religion, and then help them be proud of this and help them practice it, help them be confident of this tradition. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي والذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقم الصلاة.